My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and this is a tale of how I became utterly enchanted by a boy who is young enough to be my last born. When tales are told about how love knows no age and how one can find themselves in a difficult position all in the name of love, I think I was not listening, as my own story surprises me daily. I never envisioned falling in love again, especially not with someone half my age and beneath me in the workplace. At 58, I was the CEO of a global consulting firm, a woman who had meticulously crafted her life around discipline, precision, and control. My days blurred into a whirlwind of meetings, flights, and decisions that shaped others' futures. I believed my own future was already scripted. As a divorcee, my ex-husband Peter has full custody of our 2 children, Mercy and Paul. For me, my marriage to Peter was never rooted in love. It was always about leveraging his family's connections to advance my career. While that was my perspective, I can't say the same for Peter. He was hopelessly in love with me, or perhaps with the idea of me. I can hardly believe how the years slipped by, as a marriage of convenience intended to last only 2 years morphed into a 20-year loveless entrapment. We welcomed 2 beautiful children through surrogacy, as intimacy was never part of our equation. Our moments of closeness only occurred when I was stressed or facing a significant tender, and that was sufficient for Peter. As my children grew older, I realized that I no longer wanted to uphold the illusion of my marriage with Peter. I requested a divorce to fully commit myself to my career and the empire I had built over the years. Unsurprisingly, the children chose to remain with Peter and would visit me whenever I was available. This arrangement underscored the fact that we did not share the close connection that most mothers have with their children. I often blamed this on not carrying them for 9 months, but deep down, I understood it was rooted in my lack of desire for motherhood and my inability to love them in the way they needed. Nonetheless, we had children because it was part of our marital agreement. I consider myself a strong-willed woman who always knows what she wants in life, and I'm not hesitant to pursue it. However, nothing could have prepared me for the moment Daniel Hayes entered my office. He was 32, newly hired, bright-eyed, and brilliant in a way that made people listen. I noticed him during a presentation. His ideas were bold, his confidence effortless. When our eyes met, something shifted. I brushed it off at first. I'd spent years mastering the art of restraint. But Daniel had a way of disarming me, of making me forget the walls I'd built. It started with small things. A shared joke after a long meeting. Coffee breaks that stretched a little too long. Then came the late nights at the office, when the city outside went quiet and it was just the 2 of us, talking about everything and nothing. I told myself it was harmless. I was his boss, after all. But the truth was, I hadn't felt that alive in years. This attraction between us was winning in my heart, and I had no way of controlling it the same way I have controlled everything else in my life. As I gazed outside, lost in thought, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, and I felt something powerful stirring in my heart. My mind wandered back to how dashing he appeared in his navy blue suit, adorned with gold button detailing, and a crisp white shirt that seemed perpetually spotless. His hazel brown eyes penetrated deep into my soul, complemented by his fresh haircut and those dazzlingly white teeth that shone as he smiled with excitement about the possibility of his presentation winning us the significant tender we had been working so hard for. I couldn't help but wonder, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel this way about such a young man? I felt ashamed, embarrassed, and angry at my heart for betraying me in this manner. The night everything changed was in Singapore. We were there for a client negotiation, exhausted after a 12-hour day. We decided to walk along the marina before heading back to the hotel. The air was warm, the city lights shimmering on the water. When he reached for my hand, I didn't stop him. He stopped me in my tracks and admired my beauty as if he had never seen someone as beautiful as me. The way he said it sent chills down my spine. I believed him, or maybe it was my foolish heart betraying me again. He looked deep in my eyes and leaned in for a kiss. I met him halfway and didn't resist. It felt reckless, impossible, and utterly right. From that day forward, we were inseparable, although we made an effort to keep things discreet. In the office, we maintained a careful and professional demeanor, but outside of work, we transformed into something entirely different. He brought laughter into my life and made me feel truly seen, not just as a CEO, a mother, an older woman, or a divorcee, but simply as a woman. I hadn't realized how much I craved that acknowledgement. I began to wonder, is this what it feels like to be in love? Is this why women act in such whimsical and impulsive ways for men, all in the name of love? I had never experienced this level of passion for anyone before, nor had I ever felt like someone was my soulmate. Until now, my job had been my sole focus. Am I losing my mind? I must be. Our relationship escalated quickly to a point where we would hear whispers when we passed by in the corridors. I could feel the judgment in every boardroom and every meeting. Eventually, the board called me in. They didn't say it outright, but the message was clear: step down quietly, or watch everything unravel. People were curious, especially about me, as I was no longer the cruel man-eating boss. I was glowing. I was even wearing colorful outfits to work. I smiled more. Flowers were being delivered to my office every week without fail with a beautiful loving message on them. We were left with no choice but to come out and confess to our colleagues and declare our love to HR. HR also suggested that I should resign, stating that news of this would damage the company's reputation. Imagine a CEO dating someone young enough to be her child, she remarked. I can't deny her point. Perhaps it is best for me to step down. These thoughts echoed in my mind throughout the day. But what if they are mistaken? I've consistently made sound decisions in my career. Has love clouded my judgment? Am I truly thinking clearly? As if work wasn't challenging enough, chaos erupted when my children learned that I was dating. They judged me upon discovering how young my partner is and were furious when they realized I could genuinely love someone wholeheartedly. The aftermath was overwhelming. My daughter, Mercy, was furious. He's younger than me, Mom. Do you have any idea how this looks? My son, Paul, was worse. You're risking everything you've built for him. Their disappointment stung more than I expected. I wanted to tell them that love doesn't ask for permission, that it simply happens, but they wouldn't have understood. Daniel's family didn't take it well either. His mother called me a face. His father warned him that I'd ruin his career. That night, I sat across from Daniel in my penthouse, the city lights flickering below us. Maybe they're right, I said. Maybe this can't last. He took my hand, his eyes steady. I don't care what they think, he said. I care about us. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had before him. So I resigned. He left the firm soon after. We started over, no titles, no power, no pretense. Just us. It wasn't easy. The world never stopped judging, but we stopped listening. Now, years later, as I sit beside him on our terrace overlooking the sea, I sometimes think about the woman I used to be, the one who lived by rules and expectations. I broke every one of them for him. And I'd do it again. Because love, I've learned, doesn't follow the rules. It writes its own. Time, as it always does, softened the edges of anger and pride. My children stayed distant for a while, holidays passed with polite messages instead of visits, birthdays with brief calls instead of laughter. But life has a way of humbling even the most stubborn hearts. When Mercy's marriage began to crumble, she came to me one evening, eyes red, voice trembling. Daniel opened the door, offered her tea, and quietly left us to talk. She saw then what I had always known, that he wasn't a threat or a mistake, but a man who loved me with quiet devotion. That night, she hugged me for the first time in years and whispered, "I just want you to be happy." Paul took longer. He had inherited his father's pride and my stubbornness. It wasn't until Daniel helped him secure a partnership for his startup, without ever mentioning our connection, that Paul began to see him differently. One evening, he came by for dinner, awkward and uncertain. By dessert, he and Daniel were laughing about football, and I sat there watching them, my heart full. Even my ex-husband, Peter, eventually reached out. He had remarried, mellowed with age, and perhaps understood more than he once did. We met for coffee one afternoon, and after a long silence, he said, "You look content, Eleanor." I didn't think I'd ever see that. There was no bitterness in his voice, only acceptance. "He's good for you," he added quietly. It was the closest thing to a blessing I could have hoped for. Now, when my family gathers, Mercy with her children, Paul with his partner, Daniel by my side, the air feels lighter. The past no longer hangs between us like a shadow. They see what I see, that love, in its truest form, doesn't diminish with age or circumstance. It grows, it heals, it endures. And as the sun sets over the sea, Daniel takes my hand, his fingers warm against mine. I smile, knowing that the life we built, against every expectation, every judgment, was worth every risk. Because love, after all, doesn't just write its own rules. It rewrites the ending. A few years after Daniel and I began our life together, his mother fell ill. It was sudden, an aggressive illness that took her within months. Despite the years of distance between us, Daniel visited her often, and I encouraged him to go. I stayed behind, not wanting to intrude on their final moments. I knew she had never accepted me, and I didn't want her last memories clouded by resentment. When she passed, Daniel was heartbroken. I held him through the nights when grief came in waves, when he questioned whether he had done enough, said enough. Her death left a silence in his family that lingered for months. Thank you for listening to this story of love and reconciliation. If you connected with the story, please write a comment to us and subscribe to our channel. It was nearly a year later when he reached out. He called one afternoon, his voice quieter than I remembered. "Daniel tells me you've been good to him," he said. "I'd like to meet you." There was no apology, no grand gesture, just a simple acknowledgement that something had changed. When we met, he looked older, softer. We sat in his garden, the air heavy with the scent of roses his late wife had planted. He studied me for a long time before speaking. "She never understood," he said finally. "But I see now that he's happy. That's all a parent should want." His eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw not judgment, but peace. From that day, he became part of our lives. He joined us for dinners, birthdays, quiet Sundays by the sea. He spoke of his wife often, and sometimes, I caught a flicker of regret in his eyes, perhaps for the years wasted in disapproval. But he never said it aloud, and I never asked him to. Time has a way of healing what pride once broke. My children, Daniel's father, even the ghost of our past, all have found their place in the story we built. The word that once whispered now simply watches, and I no longer care what it says. Because love, when it's real, doesn't just rewrite the ending. It teaches everyone how to begin again.